Hey, so I'm here with Bryce. He's right about to come into the call. I'm really excited to have this call because it's going to be about business. It's going to be about a way that we can benefit everyone. So I hope everyone stays tuned and they enjoy because I'm going to talk to you as if I'm talking to him and we're all in the moment, right here and now. Okay. I'm just here taking some notes to have everything clearly within myself, accessible. Om. Om. Lucerne. Good morning, sir. I'm good. How are you? Oh, yeah, I'm headed there anyways. It's okay. Okay. About one, yeah. Okay. Great. Think I'm here. Yeah. No, I didn't miss him. He came. Yeah. Yeah, he picked up everything. Yes. Mhm. Okay. Okay. Okay, sir. No, that's all. I'll see you in a few hours. Okay. Thank you. Bye. 110. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Bye. 6, 4, 3, 5, 6, 4.
Hello.
Hey. Hey, Bryce.
Let's see. I have 3 monitors. I'm going to be doing a lot of this.
That's great. So you're like eagle eye right now.
You're right here.
Front and center. I like it.
Yeah,
How are you?
great. I slept amazing. I had these crazy dreams about like apocalyptic situations, but it was weird because it didn't feel disturbing or
Yeah,
adrenalizing. It was just kind of like, oh, this is happening, I guess.
that's cool because that's a
Yeah.
little bit about what we're going to talk about today.
Hmm. I think since we last talked, I shaved my head again.
Yeah, it's funny. I had an image of that today
Hmm.
that you shaved your head, and I was remembering that you wore a shirt similar to that.
Yep.
And you said, I got a flashback while I was walking today to the train and of that conversation, and just, memory
Hmm.
of you saying, shaved your head to get more sunlight to the brain. And
Yep.
it reminds me a little bit about what I learned with cells, plant cells. They receive input from the sun.
Yes. And we
And
do too.
yeah, and we do too. And it gives me a really strong image of a way to create any lecture, any program, just this basic outline, because all outlines need an input.
Hmm.
And in learning about really intelligent and cool systems, and I'd like to find a way in this moment to bring it out of myself, to talk about it in a way that's very present and engaging. I guess right now, in a sense, we're both wizards right now because we're we're receiving input from all these different sources of information. You've got several eagle eye screens and monitors there, and you're receiving input. And all systems contain these 5 parts. One of them is input, which is karma, another word for karma. We receive karma. It comes in, it's transported through our bodies. So space is important in between things. That's
Hmm.
transport. It allows space. It allows air and ether, so to speak. That's what the Indians called it, vata. And then we have pita, which is processing. So we process it, we metabolize it, and then where does it go? Well, just like in mitochondria, it goes to our cells, it goes to our kapha, it goes to our structure. And from there, it has an output, karma phao, fruit of action. The same exact thing. Yep.
It reminds me of this image that my friend Brian had sent me of a man standing in the sun, and it had this graphical overlay. Um, the man was naked, and he was using the microcosmic orbit to essentially circulate the energy from the sun, irradiating his testes and genitals to pull that up to supercharge his body.
I did that
And
today.
huh?
I did that today.
Yeah, excellent. Yep. And anyway, you can continue. That reminded me of.
It's great. My friend Civitiana, she showed me a little Tai Chi. What's great is all these things are intuitive, but what's great about being an organism is that we're intellectual too. And so we can sort of give ourselves inputs and redesign structures of ways of doing things. So I really like. So the way that she taught me was to put, and I liked sort of the position of the hands as well. She would have me, how everyone's pelvic tilt either goes forward or backwards. But the point is to put it a little bit forward so that way it's in alignment with the spine, and sort of put the toes a little bit inwards. And if people are practicing now, they could sort of just scooch, try to create some tension in the feet. And while they have this, they would breathe in through the nose and out through the mouth. And there are 3 centers. So tummy, chest, head. So go through the belly. And while I'm doing that, I have an image of where the energy is going. This time breathing through the chest.
That's the best breathing technique that I was also taught, that not in the form of Tai Chi, but just someone was like circular breathing, and it was relative to the microcosmic orbit and facilitating that process. But it's interesting because in the microcosmic orbit, it uses the same staging where you first do this very deep breath, like basically trying to fill the pelvis with breath, with chi, and then you pull it and you flex and you pull it up to your abdomen and right in your spine. And so the way that I use to measure it is I feel in my spine where there is movement happening, physical movement. Energetically, things are going to be moving, but actually feeling, the brush on my clothing, or in general, just the flexion of my muscles, things like that, just from the breath alone. And then you, bring it up to behind the heart, and then you bring it up to the head.
Oh, Martin. Hey, can I get some of those?
Sure. How many you need?
64.
Okay.
No,
I like that
maybe
number.
Maybe you give me like 10 or something.
Sure. Got it, Tito.
11. Thanks. That's good enough. Yeah.
All right.
Thanks, partner.
All right.
Are you holding on?
Yeah. If you need more, let me know.
You got it.
I like the number 64 because it sort of represents like practicality, because 6 plus 4 equals 1. And then that's a strong number of a little bit of tension, but it's also a number of being practical. And that's what that moment was about. So I love this.
It's cool being able to witness little things like that. I feel like even though we're in eternal chaos, we're also in eternal harmony. It's just a matter of, can we see the pattern or not?
I love that. It occurred to me yesterday, I was sitting in the grass, someone came up to me and he asked, dude, I see you doing all these things. Like, what's going on? Like, he's like, first you're doing handstands, then you're doing this. He's seeing me do all these different inputs. And so I told him, I was like, pick a goal. Whatever the goal is, just pick a goal. Handstand, it could be getting better, argument, whatever. But the point is to get us thinking in a certain way. Once you have the goal, it's all about putting inputs. So, for example, I asked them, try handstand, do something like this. And then once you do the handstand, my wrists don't feel well doing that, actually. It's like, okay, well, now we do wrist rolls. So now we tried the goal. We had a goal, tried the goal. God realized that there are 3 more parts of the system, which I'll mention soon. While he was trying this, he realized some disturbance, which is something wrong in the joint. Once that disturbance is noticed by the senses, it's able to come back to input and be adjusted back into the system, come full circle. So I like it because it's also business mindset. Obviously, it's everything mindset, but it's business mindset in the sense where we have to allow patterns to flow so that way we can use our senses to notice disturbances and update them.
Yes.
We can't avoid making mistakes. We simply update disturbances.
Very much so. I'll tell you, it's funny. There's like 2 really, well, actually, I've worked on teams since I would say 18 is when I really first started. I was working as an IT systems engineer, and it made it very clear in that job where there was not a whole lot of communication nor organization in which we could easily facilitate adaptable changes consistently. There was always these variables that would go unaccounted for. I just realized something really interesting. Sorry, not to go off topic. We'll come back to that. I've been seeing this guy, and one of the things that I went to initially see him for is that this side of my face was actually lifted slightly, and it's actually balanced out, and you can't really see it. The glasses make it look like it's not like that, but it actually has gone back down, which is cool.
It
There's
is
a
cool.
chiropractor, and he was doing man, you would love this guy. He does like this neurological brain work, reconnecting your different parts of your body back to the brain, and it's very fascinating stuff. It's not just chiropractic, it's actually a totally different system. I think I mentioned him to you. I did, definitely.
Yeah. I looked
But
at some of what he was doing and I liked it because, you know, people underestimate perhaps body tapping and the relationship that that simply has with the brain. We don't always realize, I assume, myself included, how disassociated we could be from our head coordinator, which is the thing that is able to take in inputs and make adjustments.
mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, I've even, since I started seeing him, I started changing that about how I give treatments, and I've been using the percussive force of the tapping to, you know, I mean, think of like you're in this like, you know, really nice state. Someone is like holding your body in a really supportive way. You have all this energy flowing around. You have all these thoughts coming, and all of a sudden this like tapping starts, and it's just like, whoa, like that's very different for the nervous system to experience. It's a very different input. But so getting back to what I was saying,
Yeah, about team.
about teams and systems, is that what I've learned is that, you know, it is absolutely imperative that in order for something to succeed, there has to be this like very grounded and understandable organization. Like every single time, and I've gotten better at this, that I've been a part of a team, there has always been over complexities. And it's like the background might be complex, like my automated booking system. In the end, all that is happening is that now people can go onto my website and they can book with me anytime that they want. And it reads all of my calendars, so I never have to worry about timing or anything. On the other hand, there's like millions, if not billions, lines of code instructing that software on how to work and how to listen and how to do all these different things and how to differentiate me between another person. But when it comes down to it, if everyone had to hear all of that information, then nothing would happen. It would be way more work than it was worth to have automation. And so I feel that a really big part of my life recently, like there's times where I'm significantly more intellectually engaged with research and data and numbers, and it's much more meaningful to me. And I feel that I'm at a point in my life right now where what's much more important to me is simplicity and being able to distill very complex information into a digestible and assimilatable means. And I think of myself too, like when I'm learning, if there's too much information and I don't understand something, and like it's not appropriate necessarily for me to like ask a question and go deeper into that specific thing, they kind of lose me a bit, because it's like now all of a sudden there isn't this pillar of something that they're bridging into.
System science. That's what it reminds me of. You know, I remember mentioning how I almost don't understand how anyone could learn this way. It's like a countdown.
Yep. I have a little thing rigged up so it won't happen, but I think I have to tighten it.
I was like, I have 30 seconds to finish this sentence. Like,
yep. Now my video would just go off, my audio would stay.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
With systems, I almost find myself when I'm in story mode, you know, telling certain stories. How does anyone learn this way? You know, me, for one reason or another, I get flashbacks of myself, you know, more focused on what I was drawing because there was a system involved in what I was drawing. I was always told that my what I was drawing had these sorts of it was sophisticated. It had meaning to it. It had metaphors weaved into my drawings. It's just the way that I drew. And for me, that was so interesting. The teacher would ask me certain questions. I would nod my head up and just answer if it was meaningful. But so many threads of things that didn't matter, nothing that came full circle, back to the whole. And so, two things I want to teach. One of them is what I think we both feel deep alignment with when it comes to our sacral authority, which is this ability to ride the waves and this intuition on life that can be, I'll say, intellectualized, and simply intellectualized. Because not only is this one of the centers that people seem to have the most shadow work to do with, but I feel like something about this center naturally leads up to the new earth, to the new world that I feel we're all waking up in consciousness and going into with this ridiculous, I'll say ridiculous just because I'm, being exaggerating, trying to tie a narrative here. So much information happening. And as there's a way to tether this system, this basic system, into the ocean, and I reside within the waters. And if I can bring the mind to the waters and communicate that, it seems so valuable in a world where we're constantly moving, constantly shifting, and especially for young people, which is why I want to make it, and why I think you're very helpful, make something palpable and direct to understand.
It's important.
I really like your scar, by the way.
It's not a scar. I don't know what it is though.
Yeah.
But thank you. I feel like it adds a seriousness to my face.
It definitely suits you.
And it's interesting, right? Because right here, I also have a scar, but I've never cut my head.
Interesting.
In my entire life, I don't ever remember cutting my head.
Yeah.
But it's raised, and it is definitely scar tissue. I can feel it.
Right.
It is definitely scar tissue.
Yeah.
So I must have, but I just,
Yeah.
whatever.
I'm getting a flashback of how much I've abused psychedelics. I guess maybe because we were talking about scars and patterns. And at that time, with the little structure that I had, it sort of felt like I was trying to learn my senses. And taking in ridiculous amounts of information to find that instinct. And I don't think it's a good idea for anyone at all. I mentioned this the first time we talked, that if I would have had better guidance, I wouldn't have taken these things at all.
Yeah.
And I'm super aware that, even, these yogis, for example, who took soma or took these certain things, this was something that they did once a year, if that, once every few years, but in combination with other practices as the centerpiece. These rituals being the centerpiece of these practices, not the substance. And it was not even necessarily a reminder, but just being aware that we live in physical bodies, and creating a certain looseness between our karma can give a certain space to add new inputs. So what I found, this was like hyper isolation for me. I definitely went into hermit mode, so to speak. I did a reading for myself recently where the hermit card came up as something that I own. And it's, even without the card, I would have felt total ownership over that as something that I can use. And it seemed that was necessary. All I did was go to the beach and take mushrooms, and listening to the water, watching the clouds. It felt like the most beautiful learning I've ever taken. Actually learning how systems work, simply by being there, by being around the woods and being in nature, and letting my senses, my sacral, my waves, my ocean, sort of absorb, sort of just learn a new way to flow. And it's not until recently, and I'm glad that, it's everything's so synchronized. It's not until recently where I felt like I could teach something like this.
Yeah. You definitely get to a point. I mean, I tried teaching before I was ready. I tried forcing it because I was so devoted to getting better at it. And I was always very hard on myself about it too. I was like, oh, that could have been better. Like, no, that was presented terribly. And like, that's just honest, you know? I think people saw me as like, oh, I was like hating on myself and like discrediting what I had put together. But like, nah, I'm just being honest. Like, there are good teachers, there are bad teachers, and there are people who are good at conveying information and bad. And maybe they're not, it's not so absolute. Like, people can improve and you can adapt and you can change. But in order to change, you have to be honest. So when I had some of my friends, for instance, who, you know, they were just like, oh my God, that was amazing. It was perfect. There was nothing wrong with it. I'm like, you just weren't aware of it, because there were absolutely things that were wrong with it that could have been improved. And so when I had people come out, and I had to like force people to give me criticism because they were all trying to, you know, basically give me pseudo positivity, which I'm like, I get it. You're trying to motivate me and inspire me, but it's like, I'm already inspired. I don't need that. What I need is data. I need to know, what did I do wrong? What did I do right, so that I can improve? And because of the people who were honest, I did, you know, and I did get better, and I'm still improving. And there's a lot of things I can learn from that practice. But yeah, jumping in before I was ready was like, well, I was ready because I did it, but not ready to like do it in the way that I wanted. But to get that contrast, I had to jump in like I did.
So in a sense, like certain fruits of action that you were trying to force the tree to give me mangoes before it was season. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Meanwhile, you're doing all the right things as a farmer. You're tilling the ground. But you need input. You know, you're asking these people. It's like, okay, no, I get it. The farm looks nice, but I need you to let me know where I'm.
Exactly. Yep.
Because when the mango trees come out, I can either have 8-centimeter mangoes, or I could have 12-centimeter mangoes, and my number is 12. So I need your help.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I mean, that's one of the things about our day and age, you know, is that people are so, I would call it like a hypersensitivity to criticisms and to feedback. And I think it's interesting because like there's definitely places within myself where I know that, you know, if I get the wrong criticism from the wrong person and they say it in the wrong way, like it's definitely going to trigger something for me. But I think in general, like I was saying yesterday, like when it comes to self-awareness and emotional maturity, you recognize that and you're like, okay, let's diffuse this. Mm-hmm. And then if you've educated yourself and conditioned yourself well, then you're able to work through things like that without it being a major hindrance. And then it can become useful data. You transmute it in that moment. I think that we're both very capable of doing that for a lot of things. Maybe not everything. Like I definitely need help from people, as I'm sure you do too. From time to time when we can't work through things on our own. But there it goes again.
Yeah, I remember myself. This is also a story. Me being semi-traumatized when I went skating and someone told me that I wasn't who I claimed to be. And that moment, I was so synchronized into this person's awareness and field that I believed them. I guess that's the power of empathy. And it took me a second to sit with that. Is this true? Can I listen without an opinion? Where in my body is my listening from? And then while sitting with it, it's like, oh no, this is obviously a story. And yet the emotional baggage is still there. And the rest, you know, okay, now I know the truth. Now I know the goal. The goal is to process this. Now there's clarity there. But still have to process this. Like I still have to sit with that moment. Like that moment has to be unraveled now. Even though I know the truth, I know I am who I am. That moment is karma inside of my structure now that needs to be unraveled. And it takes time depending on the intensity of the moment. And my focus was so keen around that time that in that moment, in that hour, because so many things leading up, that I absorbed that karma very, very wholesomely. And the emotion, and I stood in silence in that moment while this person is, I'll use the word, they were wigging out. And I stood in silence, which is not good for relationships, by the way, practically speaking, because input is necessary when someone is having their moment. And yet for me, I needed transport, I needed space. That's sort of part of the engineering to process this new karma that just entered me, because I wasn't sure. And you mentioned help. That same day, I've told you about a world-renowned martial artist friend of mine. I messaged her and I was like, I don't know what to do right now. And she just said, think practical, Adam. She's Russian. She comes from Crimea. Like, be practical, Adam. And she didn't have to say anything, but just whatever she said, it wasn't about what she said. It was about the input of who said it. And just her words reminded me of her coherency and reminded me of mine. And I was like, wow, this is interesting. So I do believe we need help at certain times. Yes. I find the only help I probably need now is love. It's the only really input I care about now. Everything else I feel like I can take care of.
Yeah.
Like my mind, I could break my mind. Like, I know how to do that. I can put it on something and be like, go, and it'll do what it has to do. And my favorite moments are when my mind breaks, because then it stops, looking for outcomes. It just strictly goes towards that direction. Once it starts to, weave its way through something, it's set on a goal, but eventually the goal itself starts to become more and more, what would you say, of a blur, but the momentum is still going faster towards that. So in a sense, the energy was redistributed to increase speed. And that's the moment, I call it, when my mind breaks.
Yeah. It kind of, like, just to reference that book again, the Atomic Habits book, is pretty much the whole thing about that book is that setting a goal is very difficult in actuality. Like, it takes a significant amount of energy. Like, we wake up every morning, we get a routine, and we're going to go about that routine no matter what. For me, I wake up, I move my body a little bit. I might do some red light or some whole body vibration. In the summer, I'm going out in my underpants in the sun. Like, that's just what I do every morning. Mm-hmm. If I had to consciously think about doing those things every single day, it would be very different than if I was pre-programmed to do those things. So developing that, like, autonomous habit so that your body's just prime and ready to do that already takes a lot of the energy out of it so that you can allocate that energy elsewhere.
I wanted to, before I came into this call, I was yearning to go through this lesson that I've been going through again on the different kinds of yoga. One of them we've talked about before, and I love to mention it, is what you're saying, Raja Yoga. Raja Yoga becomes Gnana Yoga, way of knowledge. Most people can't read Gnana Yoga books. You open the book, it doesn't make sense unless you've first established what you're saying. Once there's the center of consciousness, then the center of consciousness can choose a goal. But the center of consciousness has to be established. The grounding, the I, the true self, there needs to be some basic starting point. And that's the present moment. Once the present moment is established, and I have some words there too, to connect to the present moment, then suddenly it can be directed towards some goal. And it's also part of this beautiful chart I remember showing last time. I'll just give like visual here. This is a messy chart I don't like, but this will be fine for now. Sankalpa. It's part of one of my favorite songs. Amrita Tattva Satya Sankalpa Parama Shivoham.
I heard truth in there.
Yeah. Sri Paramahamsa Nityananda. I love Sanskrit because it has to do with actual parts inside of our bodies. And one of them is a goal. And with the goal is sort of, in a sense, it's what would you say? It's metaphysical, what a goal is. And it always has been. Goals are always metaphysical. With me, I mentioned this yesterday to myself. I was talking to myself, and I make videos and I talk to myself. And I'm like, golly, if I could create like a name to describe the ocean, I would own that shit. Like I would own that name because that's how most of my life is. 99%, 100% of what I do. I don't know who I am. Verbally speaking, I don't know my brain doesn't work that way. I don't have a name for me. I use Adam because it's something to in a sense keeps me grounded. Yeah. And what's cool is my birth name, Adriel, actually has Adi, which is a nickname from childhood, which means the same exact thing as Adam. And I didn't know this.
Wow.
And the first yogi actually was named Adi Yogi. The first person who brought yoga to many, many thousands of years ago to India was named Adi Yogi. And Adi meaning the first fruit or the first jewel or the first one. And what's really amazing about it is that, so the name that I just choose now is very simple for me. Obviously Adam I use, but all my names have always, people sometimes ask me, why do you keep changing your name? It's like, because I'm trying to keep myself on a goal. What are names for? I need something to remind me.
Yeah.
My experience is like an overwhelming ocean. And I guess it's part of my chart to do that with grace, to rule the ocean with grace. Especially the sacral energies. You know me, I've practiced abstinence in combination with sexual transmutation and sexual circulation for years now. This rising current of energy and intuition on life. With Adi, lately I took on a new project, and you were the first person I had on these podcasts for that project, which is, I call it just Adi Adam-Sura, and there's a reason for that. Adi is just my nickname. Ada is a short for Adam, so it's a consistent reminder. And then Am-Sura, which is a creation that I made a few years ago, a song that I made. Amonbo Am-Sura art. And so I carry those three things with me. Am-Sura for me simply means that it reminds me why I'm here. I'm here to be in the ocean and to know how to maneuver through the ocean. And to teach that is Adi Ada. To be the first one, in a sense, means to be a teacher.
Yes. I find that in my experience of teaching, one of the most unfortunate aspects that I had to experience to learn was just how much information is truly lost in translation, And I know, I'm hearing the things that you're saying, and I'm present with them, and I don't understand Sanskrit. I don't know Sanskrit beyond maybe Satya. Probably about as far as that goes, and maybe a couple of others loosely. But there is this wisdom underneath that, and to be able to anchor that, ground that, and I know that in my heart, my purpose is to help those in sort of more unawakened areas of the world to wake up. So in particularly in North America, just as an example, that there is a certain dance that there's a rhythm that everyone is playing to. And in order to cater to that dance, I sort of have to myself dance that dance a little bit. And I think when I was 19 and 20, I was much more like, to your average person, like looking back now, like I probably sounded, not to like label myself as this absolutely, but like it kind of sounds like I sounded crazy because I was just talking about like these super high level concepts that like your average person couldn't grasp. And I was like, why is nobody listening? And I really realized that it was because I wasn't actually empathizing with their level of consciousness and their level of understanding. I don't have to lower my vibration in order to do that. I don't have to, change who I am. All I'm doing is I'm just playing these different strings. I'm tuning into a different rhythm.
To make a song.
To make a song. One that a person can feel connected to. It's like, you put on like 1920s like swing music to a modern person, like a modern kid or something, and some of them might be like, wow, this is really cool and fascinating. And then other ones might actually like trap hip hop. And so it all depends on like what that person is going to resonate most with. And we can't, force a resonance.
Right.
That's the thing. It has to be completely natural.
Yeah.
And I think that like if we're to create, that's definitely going to be a big concept to work with, is just like, how can we truly like distill this information? And it comes down to like, to put it in like a very like grounded modern term, is just like, what's the market? Who are we really speaking to, and where are we speaking to them within themselves? We don't really want them in their heads. We want them to get into their bodies, because that's what most people have a problem doing. And as soon as you can get into your body and develop this higher sense of awareness, a lot of this wisdom comes a lot more naturally through other means, through language is so limited, as you know. And so to trigger that experience in an individual, I think that's really what I'm seeking to accomplish, is how can we create these individuals who have deeper bodily awareness, and what is the process that it takes to bring your average person there. There's a random person outside my house.
Speaking of. I like how you're working backwards and forwards here. The first words that came to my mind were to create a beautiful song. And I think everyone can recognize a beautiful song. Even there are some songs, for example, that are in, Hindi, but someone can hear that. I mean, younger people, especially, because a little bit less of this conditioning, and they'll listen to it, and it doesn't matter where the hell it's from. It's a beautiful song. It invokes so many different parts of the body at once. They're like, oh, this is more than my jam. Like, this is this is amazing. My favorite artist is a woman named Ananya Bhatt, for that reason. Her music really invokes something in me on many levels. And no, I don't understand a word she's saying. She's not speaking in, the languages that I'm familiar with intellectually.
Yeah.
So I think part of it is creating a beautiful song, which means like me being ready. Like, for example, since yesterday till today, because I knew this conversation was going to be had, right? That's like the goal. But there are goals in between the goals. There are checkpoints in between the goals. So what's the goal for me? The goal for me as a yogi, as Adi, is perfect samadhi, perfect absorption. So that's part of it for me. And to ground that in what? In Adam, to ground that into the present moment in a way that Am-Sura, that I can surf the ocean and teach that and impart that through what? Through demonstration. Which is why I believe our conversations are so powerful, because we demonstrate alchemy. And I'd noticed, invoke a very powerful and elicit a very powerful response in people in our conversations.
Yes, very much so. I mean, I can, looking ahead to the future, envisioning it's like, what if we were in front of a group of 100 people, right?
Exactly.
Even 1,000 people. Like, that's not actually that many people.
Yeah.
That's a big number for these types of conversations. But just to consider, like, there are going to be a lot of people who are extremely intrigued and captured by the conversation that is being had in front of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to take that lightly, because there is absolutely a significance between our dialogue. And I do think...
What do you mean?
Well, just in the conversations that we share, there is so much of us that is expressed and it's put out onto the table. And people get to experience that. And I think I said this the other day too, but it's like, why do people like watching podcasts so much? It's because they get to be participant observers on a dialogue between two individuals that might wake something up in them. In most cases, whether that's just a simple feeling or whether it's some sort of understanding, people are always seeking something from doing the things that they do, even if it's totally unconscious.
Yesterday, it called to me as a passing idea, because this guy was there to do physical workshops, but then I was thinking more, because the physical workshop for me entails systems thinking. So to teach him just this basic, how to have a goal. Once the goal is set, I'm here to give input. But then I started to think, why not, a little bit more abstract, verbal workshops, lecture workshops, which is just another word for community. So these conversations, but like you said, with a crowd, but the crowd being part of it. So for example, obviously I'm watching and you're watching people's faces. I'll see this woman's face or that guy's face, and I'll ask him to say whatever's on his mind right there. And I just know it would be, what would you say, in context, because we're all in the same room, in the same energy. And I want that to be apparent. And I know that it's apparent if I were to do that. That occurs to me now in the moment. To call on people and to hear, because sometimes we have this strong, I notice that it's a strong, I'll call it a projection, or I'll call it a pattern, or I'll call it an image that have been painted from others or from the past, that people aren't receptive to these sorts of conversations. I find people are incredibly receptive to these sorts of conversations. I'm able to better articulate it now in a way that everyone can understand it. I'm able to sort of meet people where they're at, but where they're at is where I'm at. It's just purity. It's really the only place I'm coming from and going to. It's just purity. And so if I can notice the context really, or the workshop really, is the discrepancies, the disturbances, and being in tune to my senses to notice those disturbances and to work with it in the moment, in that moment.
Yes.
So, sometimes, a yogi could spend his whole life in a cave thinking 4 thoughts, and those thoughts are never wasted. They reverberate through all of humanity. But for those of us who are working in the world, our senses, my senses, are omnipotently important, omnisciently important, because I have no karma in a way. It's like, okay, all my karma, my shit is done. All of that, so to speak, like speaking in figurative terms. Okay, I know how to do all that. Well, what's next? We'll keep on taking on karma. I'm not dead yet. And I noticed that people often have this, initially when I first talked to them, I noticed this projection. Oh no, I don't know about other people. They're not ready for this. They're not, this conversations, it may work with me, but it won't work with others. I don't find that to be the truth. I don't find that to be, I don't experience that to be the truth. I was sitting at a dinner table not so long ago with everyone who shared that opinion, that everyone thought that they didn't agree on something. And then I started to talk, and then everyone and it was so unique to me as someone who was waiting for himself, because how do you know whether or not you're a teacher? I have to observe it. Like I can't, I know
Right.
that's my goal, but to call myself that, I have to observe people on their own accord call me that and see that in them. Everyone nodded at the same exact second, like at that dinner table, and everyone was having food. And me, I fast during that period. So there was this natural where you would say, this person's out, out of the, people's usual patterns. This person, one, he doesn't eat what we eat. And also he's sitting there with tea instead of food. So there's this natural intuitive thing. Even without that, all that was thrown away in that moment where we were talking, and there was nothing but purity in everyone's face. In that moment, that connection, I realized, this is my honor. It's my honor to be part of this moment and to facilitate this purity and to see everyone's faces on the same exact page. And I do believe we're all on the same page because we're all systems. So it's all about just the system of truth. And with truth naturally comes what? The property or the purpose of freedom. The reason we tell the truth is for freedom. And on a systems approach, I can break it apart too. It sounds vague to some maybe, but the word truth itself is a system. And the word truth has 6 principles I can break it down into. And those principles lead to the purpose and use of freedom. And with freedom, we have health. Those are the 3 tiers: truth, freedom, health. Health being kapha or structure, transport being truth. So what allows the most transport in a situation? We come back to engineering. So these 3 principles turn into the 5 principles, and the 5 turn into the 9. So it's just micro, macro. Since our first conversation, it's coming right back around to the feedback loop. Just saying it different, saying it better, more coherent for people, more coherent for me. Everything's a system. So we have the system of truth, which is transport. What allows the most freedom of movement? More than one type of internet, mesh networks, community. Some of the things that we're doing right now in society-wise, it's not that we need to put in a new system. No, we need to expand the system. There are just few really stubborn people who we're letting call the shots. It's essentially all it is. And it's not like they're so intelligent and we're dumb. It's just habit. It's habit, but we're all naturally slipping out of that habit. And we may not be aware how close our neighbor is to slipping out of that habit. We may think it's us, but not the neighbor. And I find that's the most common projection that I'm noticing is, it's like I may be awake, watching Ancient Aliens, but my neighbor, he, this guy. It's a very common projection that I'm noticing. But our neighbors are awake. They're just as likely to make that shift.
Yes.
And if we don't carry around that trust, I find that has to do with the self, with our own self, our own, imposter syndrome. Not sure whether or not we're ready to make a certain shift, but I believe we are. I wholly believe in everyone. I wholly believe everyone's ready for this.
I believe everyone is capable of many of the same things. When it comes to the physical form, there are definitely certain limitations that are definitely present. Someone who is paralyzed from the waist down, while they may be able to walk one day, they're a lot less likely to walk and be able to become an Olympic athlete in triathlons. But yes, believing in people's potential is very important.
What interests me about that example is that has to do with health. And if we allow more freedom of transport, more freedom of information, which we don't completely have yet, I'll say we, even though I don't like to use that projection because we really do have it here.
We in reference to the species.
We in reference to the species. If we allow better freedom of transport, just as one example, just be very practical. We only allow insurance companies, insurance claims from state to state. If we allow them cross states, then we can benefit from all these other really deep, decentralized essentially. Then there's more competition, but there's also more transport, and the best will reign over. The yoga people will have a say. The siddhas will have a say. Everyone will decide for themselves because they're more than intelligent as a community, as a hive. We're more intelligent of making those decisions. So
I have a feeling
yeah.
that we're coming into that time and space, but I worry, and maybe this worry is just a limiting belief. But I truly believe in independent states to have their own decision making.
Mm-hmm.
Because the problem with, and I ran into this, like, I used to be more, I guess, a bit more liberal in the sense that I was truly seeking like unification of the world and things like that. And what I got really grounded into at one point was that, and I'm not saying that those views are inherently liberal, by the way. I just, in general, like, that was what I associated it with.
Yeah.
But like I kind of, I just became disillusioned in that I recognized that it is much better to have many highly functional individual cells than it is to have sort of a center mind, if you will. So it's better to have many minds. And that's what you were saying about like the hive, you know?
Yes. And freedom of transport to other hives.
Yes.
That allows the freedom of flow of information so people can have the freedom to choose for themselves what works for their health, for their system.
Yeah.
Now
Absolutely.
we have pharmaceutical, the Big Pharma, for example, they were making 10 cents per patent. It takes them about 13 years to reissue a patent. And what's interesting is they go through phase 1, then they make a certain amount of money and have a certain liberty, freedom to, do studies. Then they have to have another 5 years or something like this in order to get the second grant or the second phase of the money, and et cetera. So there's this natural pressure on them to make it to those 13 years and get a certain amount of money.
Right.
That system is set up in a way that clogs transport, makes it concrete.
Absolutely.
And so right now what's happening is they're pushing certain things that may not be completely safe for the public. Because of that, the system takes on a life of its own.
Yep.
The bees are working for this hive. And yeah.
I wonder sometimes, like, so many people are just blindly indoctrinated. I mean, getting your doctorate, you have been indoctrinated. You know, that's the nature of it. It's that you've been indoctrinated into a system. And
peer-reviewed system. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're only allowed to get tenure if your articles essentially have been cited a certain amount of times. So the system itself is, yes.
Exactly, right? And yeah, I just find that sort of that blind indoctrination, there are people passing it generation to generation without even recognizing what the origins of some of those systems are.
But on a positive note as well, which I wanted to add, those pharmaceutical companies which are making 10 cents per patent are now making 0.0001 since last year to this year, which is again, which sort of brings back why I mentioned that's why they're pushing certain things that may not be good for the public, because it's not working. People are waking up and they're more than aware of the side effects, and they're like, this is not working for me. Some information from parent to child to child to child is like, okay, didn't work for my mom, didn't work for, this, and now it's not working for me. I don't think I want to take this levetiracetam anymore. I want to try yoga. I want to try this. And it's just about people trying different things, new things that work for their system. And as systems, we need different inputs at different times. And I think that's part of this transport. Allowing more transport in part means educating people on a systems-based approach, how to look at the whole, not to what would you say? Not to reduce everything to a single mechanism, because no bee is apart from the hive.
Yes.
No bee is apart from the hive. We share similar patterns, and yet everyone must, on an individual level, find what works for them. And we have more than enough of this information all around the world being hyper connected now that we can have that free flow of information. We can have that free flow of information. And to a large extent, we do. We have some censorship, but it's really by our choice.
Yeah,
really by
in a lot of ways, it is.
We have three primary companies which have owned most of the media. But if we were just aware of this simple systems approach, we would naturally be aware of that. I think it's simply the convolution that allows us to continue doing that. You have nice teeth.
Thank you. I do a lot to take care of them.
You're taking in more transport for your body. That's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
I have some interesting things here, which I think would be good. So we mentioned the Trinity, those three things, which are those three turn into the 5 and the 5 turn into the 9. And the 9 is simple. If the 5 is the structure, input, output, input, fruit of action, that jazz, metabolism, structure, storage, those things, that's an open system, which means if I watch an ad 17 times, the fruit of that action is going to be direct. That's an open system. What distinguishes an intelligent one? 3 more factors, 3 or 4, 4. That's vikaras, which is disturbances. My indriyas are what pick up on those disturbances, and they feed them back to my coordinator mind, which is able to make updates on those ads instead of like, okay, so this didn't work for me. So I find we talked about this too. By taking certain substances, we should be more mindful. By taking certain substances, we sometimes dull those senses that are able to pick up on those discrepancies. And if we can't censor the discrepancies, we become more like open systems, which means we become susceptible to someone else's goal and not our own. And I do believe we're each here with our own goal, with our own purpose.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Coming at it from an education and hive mind, these 3 principles. So those are the 9, but the 3 primary ones that make it are transport, conversion, which is freedom, and health, which is storage. But those 3 words can be changed for other words because the system exists even without the words. So the earliest form of our societies was hunter-gatherer. So that's the thing itself. The thing itself has certain relationships. It had a goal. What does the hunter-gatherer, what's the goal to that? Well, men gathered mostly because this is what the way the system was. And women taught. Women were these hyper-educated, communal sort of beings that knew all of the herbs. They knew all of the knowledge, and they taught the children because they were naturally in this space to teach children. And we know neurologically that there's certain things that would make them better at this. That made the society 3, the property. There's the thing itself, the goal, and then the properties of the goal. The properties of that goal were matriarchal society, and we lived most of our lives for millions of years like this. And so people knew the origin of the child by the mother and not the father. And it was actually everyone's duty, all the fathers, all the men, to take care of the children. And all the women to teach and educate the children and show them that love. I notice this sometimes with larger groups of people who, I'll use this word, as they involve, they lean more towards this matriarchal type of pattern. I'm not saying that's where the future is, but this is something I've observed. After that, we had farming, and with farming being the thing itself instead of the hunter-gatherer, certain things changed. There was a shift in the whole hive. And the shift was we all had last names now, ownership. So this is where the masculine sort of began to have his name on things, and where the origin of the son was known by the father through this farming. And also he would inherit the farm. And so there were practical reasons why that was there as well. After that, we had industrial as the thing itself. And the goal of this industrial was complicated relationships, capitalism. But it's an interesting capitalism because the properties that came from that was for those who can afford its democracy. And now we're shifting out of this. We're shifting out of this into the thing itself. I can't say, because we're in it. This is why we have a foot in the unknown here. But I can observe what the, this word has a really negative approach, but I think we've never had the structure to do it. And I can break it down as well. The word that was used for me was socialism, but it's grounded in the way that it makes it practical is through workers, the working class people being the new government. That means every single person deciding what's good for themselves. Things like blockchain and Bitcoin and etc. These things are excellent examples of how something can become decentralized between me and you, and how systems can help us govern the hive. Right now, we pretty much have one government, one internet. I guess one government too. One internet. But we can create several internets. It was never supposed to be one internet. We were meant to have several internets, mesh networks among one another. And
that is really what it is now.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. In China, you're not allowed to visit most of the websites that the world is able to, and so every single network, from a home network to our cell networks, everything is its own individual network being meshed together to create this infrastructure.
Yes.
It's one little node at a time, all these different parameters and rules.
Yeah, and that's the way that misguided few are able to control for profit.
Yep.
And I say misguided because if they knew the truth, they wouldn't want to be there.
Yeah.
I speak from my heart there as well. It's
interesting to think like I said, I in a lot of ways I got I'm not disillusioned, or I don't believe that it's impossible. I don't think that we're gonna see true, in the sense of socialism, just as an example, or this concept of a truly people controlled system. In order to do that, you have to have individuals who are all willing to participate and not allow greed or other more worldly things interfere with their devotion to maintaining the balance between people, and not allowing their ego to be injected into their actions. Or I should say, ego is fine, because that's a part of the ego, is being willing to do that. But you know what I'm saying, as in
the ego.
Say it one more time.
We need to update the ego.
Yeah, this more, if you will, the enlightened ego. And I actually, in one of the courses I'm developing right now, I'm called Nonlinear Integrative Assessment Healing, NLIA. I talk about the 5 stages of ego, from all the way from unconscious to total egolessness, and everything in between. And every single aspect of that is very important, so long as we are in the human form. We should never reject one or the other any more than another. And we might want to move away from some and move into others, but it's just sort of a basis of that concept. But that's what I've run into, and that's what I've witnessed upon looking into these governments, for instance, that will make a promise of, we will give the power to the people. And any government that says that, I have incredible distrust for. I do not believe that any government, because it says it in their name, government.
Yeah.
Government. They are there to control. They are there to take power. That is what they're there for. And I believe in the use of some government. I do believe that we need organization and we need those channels for certain things. and to maintain some level of order and balance. But at the same time, I believe in the people. For instance, with cryptocurrency, if it wasn't for the countries themselves applying legislation to the value and saying, if you make this much money on cryptocurrency, we're going to take this much away from it. Right now in America, which is one of the most disgusting things I've seen, they're trying to take 50% away from capital gains, which means that if you were to make $1 in profit, the US government wants to take 50% of that. And they say it's because they're taxing the rich. They say that it's for the greater good. But really what they're doing is that they're essentially crippling people's ability to get rich, to get wealthy, to attain financial freedom. And financial freedom it's huge. The people I know who are genuinely financially free, they get to live their dream life. You know, in this world, they get to, one of them works as a carpenter. He doesn't have to work as a carpenter. He has plenty of money. He does it because he loves carpentry. He does it out of love.
Yeah.
And we should never give that much power away to something like that if we can avoid it. But in this world, like, it is really, it's not that it's unfair because we all have the same opportunities and we all choose to come in. And so in a way there is a fairness to it. But I think it's that this world can be very unforgiving. And it's like, you know, why would somebody such as myself, who all that I want is to create a more loving world, why would I even own a firearm? Why would I contribute to a company like that? It's because I've learned that, and maybe this is a crippling belief of my own, that this world is not it's not ready. Like, the people of this world, unless there is like a spiritual miracle, which I believe is genuinely probably the only way, and I'm not saying like a theological or religious miracle, but a genuine spiritual miracle within every single one of these individuals, causing them to deeply awaken to the interconnectedness and the responsibility of their actions and its effects on every single individual. That is pretty much the only way that I see this like true sense of like total unification of humanity coming together. And there's always going to be like disagreements. And I mean, in this reality, even if you look in the micro world, right, within like little tiny like cells and microbes, it's like a warscape. It's actually extremely violent. And they're always fighting, and they're always like, you know,
in my
trying
body
to survive.
Yeah, in my body, very violent.
Yes, it is. And it creates, you know,
And
some
great.
level of harmony for us to be sustained. But yeah, I don't know. I forget kind of like where I was going with that.
I've been part of a project recently which started to educate me on these system sciences to destroy the establishment. And I use those words with my heart wide open. And the way to destroy an establishment is to understand the system by which it operates. The question is 5 years or 10, 5 years or 20, so on. But this is happening. I mean, the Big Pharma example is a perfect and prime example of exactly that. We may not be, the input we're receiving is not of the full story. What we're seeing on people talk about out loud, what we're seeing people talk about on the television is not what's happening under the curtains. It's not what's happening between our energies. It's not what's happening between the cells. You know, it's sort of like I'm getting an image of, we're seeing a bunch of people talk about what the cells are doing. And if anyone's actually looking at what the cells are doing, it's not what the cells are doing. They have like their own dialogue for this cell is now, but meanwhile, there's a larger picture taking place. And there's also a smaller picture taking place in between each cell. I recently, and I like using this something that helps me when I'm feeling overwhelmed in my studies is I remember that particles are the organs of atoms, and atoms are the organs of molecules, and molecules are the organs of organelles, and organelles are the organs of cells. And organisms are I skipped tissues. Organisms are organs of an ecosystem. We're the organs of an ecosystem. So my job is only to allow more free transport, to allow nature to take its course. There's a cancer, and cancer is good. Like, it has its place. But if I have a vaccine, a real vaccine, no formaldehyde, if I have something and I can even burn my body to contribute, that's wonderful. What is it? I almost blurred out for me at the end.
A potential alternative to vaccination that is a lot safer. Potentially, I would love to see it actually go through like the clinicals. But I was just driving with the chemist yesterday. That's who I took to the dentist, and he's the inventor of that technology. It's all about using a superhuman microbiome to essentially have it fight for us, and then they those microbes are creating all of this transcription information. And it's kind of like like with the mRNA, they call it like a vaccine, but it's not really a vaccine technically. If you look into like the strict medical definition of vaccine, this is actually different. This is actually a gene therapy. And this is different, although similar. It will affect your genes, but it's happening from the microbes that are going to be or should be in your body already producing these things for you. So that way it's not coming from God knows what, like fetal cells or green monkey kidney cells or all these other like foreign DNA. Like you don't need that. You just need the microbes that would already be in your body doing the work anyway, and you have to sustain those. And yeah.
Oh, wonderful. I love how there are so many people taking an approach to discuss the immune system. And this conversation is allowing more freedom of transport.
Yeah, totally.
The more people are aware of the other alternatives of just how the system works, how the body works. We're talking about an autoimmune condition when we're talking about CVID. Talking about an immune situation. And yet, how rarely among the public dialogue, right, among the television, am I hearing any discussion on immune system, on immune health, and how to sustain immune health? So because there's restriction of transport, there's naturally, the relationship is not freedom, it's something else. And then there's no health. And so it can't come back around full circle. So I think my only job is to allow more freedom of transport. And with that will naturally come conversion. Metabolism happens on its own. Transport is simply, I take in some food, for example. It's transported and metabolized on its own. And then it becomes my structure. So there's a natural intelligence happening in the background. My job is very small, but it's specific. It's simply to allow more freedom of transport. And through engineering these principles, I mentioned how I've been working in this. Through engineering these principles, it's essentially, and I love this quote, one can't win by using the methods of the enemy. And I have to use the word enemy there because I have to create a contrast. Yeah, I have to create a contrast. And so I'd like to, because I have mentioned to you the principles of truth, but I've not mentioned the principles of the enemies. So to mention what principles won't lead to victory, I have to mention the principles of the enemy. And I think it'll create a much clearer picture here as well with this.
I just want to say I have to go in just a few minutes to
Yeah,
go
yeah,
hop on another call.
great. It's a good idea. So we'll wrap up with this.
Hmm.
And there's a wonderful little thing here, which I think will be good that my heart wants to mention. So where we have inclusivity, that means everyone's invited, just like these conversations, in a sense, everyone isn't like the mindset that we're taking to it. And this is where it starts with our organism, with our system. If we carry around inclusivity, it makes a change. It matters because this allows freedom of transport.
Hmm.
One of the inputs of the enemy is exclusivity. Then we have secrecy, where we allow transparency, just like in this conversation, utter transparency. Things we can say, things we can't say,
Yes.
different time for different things, so on. But transparency in what the experience in the moment is. Then where we have systems thinking, which is a really important one for me. The way of the enemy has reductionism.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. Where we have decentralization, which means all experts get to have a say and let the public decide. So
Hmm.
ultimate transport. We have centralization where only a few experts get to have an opinion. Where we have freedom, they have censorship. It's part of centralization. And then the last one is really important in regards to system thinking too. So these things overlap one another. Depersonalization, that means talking about people as if they were simply statistics.
Hmm.
This gives a feeding ground for people to create all sorts of discrepancies with one another that may not be there.
Hmm. Or viewing people under a mask.
Mm. Whereas we have personalization, and this is also where I really like symbolic language because it makes things very personal and very intimate for people.
Yeah.
Often, if I'm talking to a crowd of people, I'll say, I'm here on the behalf of the Great Mother. And yet I speak as an individual.
Hmm.
Those who feel that. It's personal. It's as personal as it gets.
Hmm.
And so using the enemy's methods to win is losing because what is good for the whole is good for you. What serves the bee serves the hive, and what serves the hive serves the bee.
Could you take a picture of that and send it to me?
Absolutely.
So I just have it. That was very beautiful. It was elegantly put together as well.